Hello everyone, this is Erik, the Asian movie enthusiast, and this is my review of Smuggler, a Japanese thriller from 2011. Now this is a live-action adaptation of Shohei Manabe's manga of the same name. So our main character is a failed actor with big-time debts, played by Satoshi Tsumabuki, and his loan shark gives him a job as an assistant to a shady man, played by Masatoshi Nagase, smuggling dead bodies of people who were murdered by local gangs. So they're basically the cleaners, so to speak, right? Unfortunately for him, he gets caught in the middle of a violent mob war that could prove hazardous to his health because of the involvement of a deadly hitman played by Ando Masanobu. So this was directed by Katsuhito Ishii, who previously directed films like Shark Skin Man and Peach Hip Girl, Party 7, The Taste of Tea, and Funky Forest, The First Contact, among some others. Now, if you've seen any of those films, you'll know that his films tend to be rather quirky and odd. And that style is carried over into Smuggler, but it's in a much darker tone. And because of the darker tone, I think Smuggler is not directly comparable to his prior filmography, but you can definitely feel his influence on it. Still feels like an Ishii film, in my opinion. So, I previously reviewed the Korean film Masquerade recently, right? And I said that everyone needed to watch it because the vast majority of people who do watch it will enjoy it. Smuggler is a different beast, in my opinion. It's a much more divisive film for a few reasons, one of which is Ishii's quirky style and the fact that he chose to load this film to the brim with black humor. Alright, so even during the opening 10 minutes, this movie might throw you for a loop, because you might think, oh, this is like a gangster comedy. These side actors are kind of hamming it up, you know what I mean? And it's like, oh, okay, this is going to be a funny movie. But then we get a very cool slow motion nunchaku attack that mixes violence and humor together. So then you're like, oh, okay, and then it gets a little creepy at times in that scene as well. So there's definitely some tonal shifts in this film, and they occur throughout the entire runtime. So it's gonna, some people are gonna find Smuggler to be a somewhat awkward experience. I personally found it to be quite entertaining, so just keep that in mind. This kind of starts with a dual storyline. You have two different stories. You got Tsumabuki's story, and you got Masanobu's. And they don't really interact with each other for a while, even though they're both involved with the criminal underworld. So you're kind of wondering early on, how are these guys going to interact? Are they going to cross paths at all? And how will they impact one another if they do? And that's kind of intriguing for me. It's a story that I think gets better and more interesting as the film moves along. It just gets better and better. I think it flows pretty naturally, and it's difficult to predict. Like, there's things that happen during the second half of this film that you would not predict at the beginning of the film. And I like that. Now, I previously mentioned that some of the side characters or side actors kind of ham up their acting, kind of wacky performances, but the core cast are really good. They're all very good, really. I mean, Satoshi Tsumabuki is an actor that I'll watch in anything. I've mentioned this before. He's perfectly cast in this film because he's really good at playing, expressing vulnerability. His character is very vulnerable at times in this. Kind of a failed, he feels like he's failed in life and stuff like that, and he gets into situations where he's over his head, and he's really good at that. Ando Masanobu is most well known for his badass role in Battle Royale, right? He was like the orange-haired kid in that one. And he carries that over into Smuggler for sure. His weapon of choice in this film is the nunchaku. Yeah, he uses nunchaku. But his character has layers in this film, and he shows different emotional sides. I really liked his performance in this. I liked his character quite a bit, too. It'll surprise you. Masatoshi Nagase plays Tsumabuki's criminal mentor, right? And Nagase is very familiar with oddball roles. I mean, he appeared in the Mike Yokohama films, which are pretty weird. And he was in Electric Dragon 80,000 Volts as well. And if you've seen that one, you know how weird that one was. So he's perfectly at home in a film that's a bit quirky. So he's good in this. Hikari Mitsushima has a supporting role and does a fine job as usual. I always like seeing her. And then we get a few cameos from some well-known actors that I won't spoil for you. The last thing I need to point out, I think, is that, it's in regard to that darker tone I mentioned. I say darker tone, and what I mean by that really is that there is some bloody violence in this, and there is one torture sequence. All right, there's one torture sequence. It's like a gangster torture, where a gangster captures someone and they're torturing them for information. So I'm just warning you about that. It gets a little dicey, okay? But again, that's why this film is a little bit odd, because there's some black humor surrounding that scene, even a little bit in the scene. So just keep that in mind. But if I enjoyed Smuggler, man. I think this is a good flick. It's interesting. It's an interesting watch for people who want something a little bit quirky, a little bit different, and a little bit dark, and something that has an interesting story and characters. It's currently available on Amazon streaming in the United States. And as always, we'll see you next time.